Hi. Today we're going to talk about a crisis intervention topic. Um, the topic is homelessness. So, first, we're going to introduce the problem. We'll talk about contributing factors, the bidirectionality between homelessness, mental illness, and substance use disorders. We'll talk about the stigma facing homeless people. Um, I'm going to present four pretend clients. I'm calling that section of the presentation Faces of Homelessness. Um, we'll talk about crisis intervention, and we'll talk about prevention. All right, so everything we know about the homeless population in the United States is from these counts that the Department of Housing and Urban Development do every January. So there's one specific night in January of each year where thousands of volunteers go out and count the homeless population all across the country. So in every community, there are volunteers who do this. They go out late at night um, and they work overnight. So the homeless population is generally sleeping. So they do it at night on purpose because everybody's in one spot. They're sleeping and they're staying still. So that way there wouldn't be mistakes where they count somebody twice if the person's moving around. So these are called point in time counts, and it's done every January. So the last year that we have data for is January of 2024. And at that point in time count in the United States, there were 771,480 homeless Americans. So they count people who are in temporary shelters, emergency shelters, who are unhoused, who are living outside. And they try to determine the race of each person that they count as well. So we have statistics on how many homeless people there are and what the racial breakdown is. So there was a big increase in homelessness from 2023 to 2024. There was an 18% increase in homelessness in 1 year. So that's pretty disturbing and pretty alarming that the problem is growing so much. The one bright spot in the statistics is that at the last point in time count, the number of homeless veterans dropped significantly. And that's because, and now homeless veterans are at their lowest number since they've started counting the veteran population among homeless people. The VA housed nearly 48,000 people who were experiencing homelessness, and that's why there's such a big drop in the homeless population among veterans. On the flip side, an alarming statistic is that family homelessness, so either one parent with children or two parents with children, family homelessness rose 39% in 2024. At the last count, there were nearly 150,000 children who were homeless. 1 in 5 people who are homeless are 55 years old or older, and nearly half of those aged 55 or older are unsheltered, living outdoors. So why is homelessness on the rise? There's a number of reasons. We have an affordable housing crisis, and it's getting worse. Home prices and rents are increasing faster than wages are increasing, and many people just can't keep up and can't afford housing. There's rising inflation, stagnant wages in the low and middle class. There's systemic racism, which we'll talk more about in a minute. Natural disasters are causing people to be unhoused. Immigration is a factor. The expanded child tax credit ended, so that is making families worse off financially. Low levels of education have been a contributing factor for many years. And lack of health insurance contributes to the homelessness crisis because if you don't have health insurance, then even minor health expenses can set you back quite a bit financially. So let's talk about oppression and racism. Every year, the point in time count shows that there are certain racial groups who have higher rates of homelessness than anybody else. Those groups are Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, Alaska Natives, and Black and African American people, as well as the LGBTQ community. So these are all groups that have been historically oppressed. Some have had their land taken away from them. They're targets of systemic racism, targets of discrimination in housing, targets of discrimination in general, targets of employment discrimination. And these groups have much higher rates of homelessness than non-marginalized groups. Some other factors that contribute to homelessness. Many people face financial problems, which could cause them to lose a home, but they have family or friends nearby that they can live with. So they're less likely to become homeless. People who have no family members nearby, or they're estranged from their family, or they don't have friends, they're at much greater risk of becoming homeless. Children who age out of the foster system are very much at risk of becoming homeless. And that can be for multiple reasons. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And then untreated mental illness or substance use disorders make people more vulnerable as well. So some social issues related to homelessness. Homeless people have few social connections, which contribute to them becoming homeless. Because if they had family or friends to support them, they probably would be able to live with those people. Homeless people are socially isolated because they don't have neighbors, which is a big source of social connections for many people. And they don't have coworkers because generally homeless people usually don't work. Homeless people are socially ostracized by the community because they're dirty, because they smell bad, and because people often view them as quote unquote crazy. So let's talk about that. There is bidirectionality between homelessness and mental illness. 21% of the homeless population has a severe mental illness. Only 6% of the general population has a severe mental illness. So there's definitely more homeless people with severe mental illness than you would expect. 16% of homeless people have a substance use disorder. So having a severe mental illness or a substance use disorder makes you more likely to become homeless because an untreated mental illness can make it harder for you to hold a job. You can be discriminated against when trying to get housing. And in the other direction, being homeless can cause a person to develop mental illness or substance use disorders. People who are homeless are more likely to become anxious, depressed, have PTSD, and substance use disorders. So it goes both ways. All right, let's talk about stigma. In the United States, our media links homelessness and mental illness in such a profound way that most people in the US think that the majority of homeless people are mentally ill. And that is definitely not the case. Like I said, 21% of the homeless population has a severe mental illness, so about 1 in 5. There was a study done by Snow Hill et al. Back in 2024, where they showed people photos of homeless people, and they either told them that the homeless person was mentally ill and then became homeless, or they told them that the person was homeless and then became mentally ill. And across the board, it was very common for people who were told that the person was mentally ill first and then became homeless those people generally were sympathetic and thought that it made sense. They didn't blame the homeless person. Um, so they were more understanding if the person was mentally ill first. But if they were told that the person was homeless first and then became mentally ill, they tended to blame the person for being homeless. So this shows that there is a stigma related to homelessness, um, not just in the general population, but also medical providers have stigmas against homeless people as well. Um, all right, think I mentioned this earlier. People with severe mental illnesses and substance use disorders are more likely to be discriminated against when trying to get housing, um, and also are more likely to have issues holding a job. There are very real health consequences to being homeless. Homeless people tend to live shorter lifespans than those who are housed. Um, about 60% of the homeless population does not have health insurance, and they tend to live about 30 years less than those who have homes. Um, so obviously, not having a home is very stressful and bad for your health. Homeless people have higher rates of PTSD than the general population. This is part of why there were so many homeless veterans for so long, because combat veterans often return from war with PTSD, and also veterans have a tendency to not want to seek mental health care, just because of the military culture that says be strong and handle things on your own. So here's the faces of homelessness part of the presentation. I'm going to present 4 people who could be homeless clients that you would meet. Maria is 30 years old. She's married to Adam, who's 32. They have 3 children, ages 1, 4, and 8. Adam recently lost his job. He was the sole breadwinner. He's become depressed and he started drinking. And one night he came home and he beat Maria in front of their children. She waited until he fell asleep, and then she packed a few things, took the kids, and went to a friend's house. The friend didn't have space for 4 more people long term. So Maria and her children are now living in a shelter. This is an example of how domestic abuse is a cause of homelessness for some adults and some children. It is a fairly large factor in people becoming homeless. Anita is an 18-year-old young woman. Her parents physically abused her, and she was put in foster care at the age of 6. And she has lived in 8 different foster homes. She recently turned 18 and aged out of the system. She was working part-time at a bookstore, and she was in high school. She had to drop out of high school, and even though she tried to work full-time, she just didn't have enough money to be able to afford an apartment. Foster kids who age out of the system often become homeless due to having low-wage jobs, low educational attainment, often not finishing high school. Very infrequently, they're able to go to college, and they have no family support. So if you think about how you would have done at the age of 18 without any family to support you, I think you get the idea of how bleak their situation is. 50% of the homeless population has spent time in foster care. Eric is 50 years old. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia at the age of 18. He lived with his parents until he was 27, and then he moved out on his own. Having hallucinations makes it hard for him to hold a job, and he has been homeless on and off for the past 20 years. Severe mental illness makes it difficult for people to hold jobs, and definitely contributes to financial problems and homelessness, as well as landlords possibly discriminating against someone like Eric. Jake is a veteran of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. He did 3 tours. He saw combat, and he got out of the Army at age 26. He was depressed, anxious, had PTSD, and a substance use disorder when he got out of the military. He has been homeless for the past 15 years. Veterans face high rates of homelessness. Fortunately, these rates are declining because of public outcry against such high rates, and because the VA has been putting funds and interventions in place to reduce homelessness among veterans. Homeless people have no place to live. They have no safe place to store their possessions. They have to carry their belongings. They don't have access to running water, showers, toilets. They're frequently hungry, frequently dehydrated. They're exposed to the elements, often have no health care, are anxious to sleep in public, face stigma from the general population and from healthcare providers, and they're often victims of crimes. Since 2016, homelessness, unsheltered homelessness, and chronic homelessness are all on the rise. Beds are often added to shelters. About 31,000 beds were added in 2022, but that's not keeping pace with the number of new homeless people. It's easier to prevent homelessness than it is to help somebody become rehoused after they've become homeless. We need to expand affordable homes, raise the minimum wage, make mental health care, physical health care, and substance use treatment all affordable for everyone. In many communities, shelters are at capacity and there's no room for anyone. But sometimes, if there are beds available, crisis teams can contact individuals who are unhoused and offer them a spot in an emergency shelter or a transitional housing arrangement. They receive food, clothing, hygiene supplies, and support, health support, mental health and physical health support at these places. So that's one of the best crisis intervention strategies to get somebody rehoused as quickly as possible. There are mobile crisis units that can provide mental health treatment for people with mental health crises or substance use crises. These teams use trauma-informed care and de-escalation, as we've learned about in our textbook. They can be taken to hospitals for treatment or treatment centers if it's a substance use issue. There's a growing number of organizations that provide hot meals and bring them to people in the community who are homeless where they are located. There are mobile showers and laundry units so people can take a shower and wash their clothes on a regular basis. There's a crisis intervention for youth, helping them get connected with educational assistance and helping with family mediation if they have a family that they're estranged from. Crisis workers try to get them back in touch with their family of origin. There are local and state funds in many places that provide emergency rental assistance to people if they are in crisis and about to lose their homes. So there's outreach, like in a beautiful crisis response system. There's outreach, emergency services and shelters, coordinated entry, which is where people identify, assess, and refer people to housing assistance. There's prevention that helps people maintain their homes. There's diversion, which helps people identify immediate housing arrangements that they perhaps had not considered. There's emergency shelters for people who are fleeing dangerous situations like domestic violence. And then there's permanent housing solutions like rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing programs in many communities. Just as the public will has decreased homelessness among veterans, if people really decided to end homelessness among the general population, it could be done. We need an increase in wages, more affordable health care, affordable housing, and more affordable mental health care and substance abuse treatment. As counselors, we're in a unique position to help people prevent homelessness or end the cycle of homelessness. We can help people improve communication with family members to increase their social supports. We can treat mental illness and substance abuse disorders. We can provide referrals to psychiatrists so they have medication management, social workers so they can be connected to resources, doctors for medical care. We can do career counseling to help them get a better job. And of course, there's also financial counseling available to people. So the final takeaway is homelessness is a growing problem impacting every community in the country. While there are fewer beds than those who are needing beds, which is certainly a bleak situation, there are some bright spots. Every year, beds are added. And as crisis intervention systems grow in communities, they're able to connect people with the resources that they need quicker. And of course, as counselors, we can help people treat mental illness and substance abuse disorders, which would definitely decrease rates of homelessness. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.